2 weeks after major surgery, I could barely stand for 10 minutes. Yet my husband's family demanded I cook a full Christmas feast, like nothing had happened. What I did next didn't just change that Christmas, it changed my life forever. Stay with me because you're about to hear how I turned my biggest betrayal into the most powerful freedom I've ever claimed. Emily's fingers trembled as she reached for the television remote. Pain ripped through her abdomen like a sudden bolt of lightning, making her gasp and clutch the bandages beneath her oversized sweater. It had been 2 weeks since her major abdominal surgery, and she still couldn't do the simplest tasks without feeling like her body was being torn apart from the inside. She pressed her palm against the fresh incision, breathing through gritted teeth, until the spasm subsided. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the heating system and the distant hum of a car passing by outside. Every sound seemed sharper these days, her body hyper-aware of every ache, every sting, every betrayal of her own flesh. Just as she managed to steady herself, Daniel strolled into the living room, his eyes glued to his phone. He barely glanced at her, didn't notice the way her face paled with pain or how tightly she was gripping the edge of the couch to stay upright. "Mom called," Daniel said casually, scrolling through his notifications. "Everyone's coming here for Christmas dinner." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean here?" Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled violently. Daniel shrugged. "Yeah, Mom, Dad, Ashley, Tyler, Madison, everyone. They're all coming. Mom says she'll handle decorations. You just need to do the cooking and hosting part. You know how she is about Christmas traditions." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt slightly. Emily gripped the armrest harder, her heart pounding in her ears. "Daniel," she said slowly, carefully, as if speaking to a child. "I can barely stand for 10 minutes at a time. The doctor specifically said no lifting, no standing for long periods." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Come on, Em. Don't be so dramatic, it's just cooking. Mom does it all the time and she's got arthritis." Emily stared at him, disbelief spreading like a cold fog over her mind. The casual dismissal, the utter disregard, it wasn't new. It had been there all along, tucked beneath the polite smiles and hollow reassurances. But for the first time, she truly saw it for what it was. Pain shot through her side again, but this time she didn't flinch. She absorbed it, let it anchor her in this moment of grim clarity. "I had surgery, Beta," she said louder, her voice beginning to shake, not from fear, but from a simmering rage she barely recognized as her own. "This isn't arthritis. My organs were literally moved and stitched back together." Daniel shrugged again, already drifting back toward the kitchen. "You'll be fine. It's just one day." One day? Like all the other one days she had endured, hosting Thanksgiving with a fever of 102 degrees, cooking Easter brunch while fighting off a migraine so severe she could barely see, organizing birthday parties on crutches after spraining her ankle. The memories flickered through her mind like old home movies. Each one a tiny betrayal. She had brushed aside, swallowed down, excused in the name of love, family, duty. But now something cracked open deep inside her. A slow, deliberate unraveling of the lies she had told herself for years. Emily leaned back into the couch, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above. Her body ached, her scar throbbed, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she saw the truth. They didn't care about her pain, they never had. She was just a piece of the machinery that kept their holidays running smoothly. A cook, a cleaner, a hostess. Her health, her exhaustion, her needs had always come second to their comfort. Her chest tightened, not with sadness, but with a strange, liberating kind of anger. An anger that whispered of possibilities, of change. Daniel's voice drifted in from the kitchen, chatting animatedly with someone, probably his mother, Margaret, about Christmas table arrangements and seating plans. "Mom says make sure the turkey's not dry this year." He laughed. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of tears she refused to let fall. Not this time. Not anymore. She opened her eyes and stared at the blank television screen. Her reflection stared back at her. Pale, tired, broken. But behind the exhaustion, there was something else. Resolve. In that moment, Emily realized something vital. She was done being invisible. She was done being convenient, and for the first time in a long, long while, a tiny, defiant smile pulled at the corners of her mouth. This Christmas would be different. Very different. As the afternoon light faded into a heavy gray dusk, Emily remained seated on the couch, the distant murmur of Daniel's voice bleeding in from the kitchen. She stared at the muted television, lost in a haze of memories she could no longer push aside. Every holiday blurred together, now a collage of exhaustion and unspoken resentment. She remembered one Christmas Eve 3 years ago, shivering in the kitchen with a brutal case of the flu. Her head had felt like it was filled with molten lead, her body trembling with fever, but Margaret insisted that traditions must be honored. A proper Christmas dinner, she had said over the phone, is the glue that holds a family together. So Emily cooked turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, the whole spread. She had barely been able to taste any of it through the haze of sickness. Daniel hadn't lifted a finger. He had simply patted her shoulder and said, "Thanks, babe," before joining his family at the table, laughing and drinking as if nothing was amiss. Then there was Madison's Sweet 16 party, where Emily had catered the entire event while quietly battling food poisoning. She had spent most of the evening clenching her stomach, smiling through waves of nausea, refilling trays of finger foods and keeping the punch bowl topped off. No one noticed how pale she was, how tightly she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. And last, Thanksgiving, a day seared into her memory when she cooked for 12 people, despite spraining her ankle just days before. She had hopped around the kitchen, pain flaring up her leg with every step, while Daniel and Margaret discussed football schedules in the living room. Not once did anyone offer to help. Not once did anyone suggest postponing or downsizing. Not once did anyone see her. Emily's hands curled into fists against her lap, nails digging into the soft fabric of her leggings. It wasn't just that they had expected her to serve, it was that they had felt entitled to her labor, her pain, her sacrifices. A family gathering was only a success if Emily had bled herself dry to make it happen. She thought back to a conversation she had overheard last Easter when Margaret had whispered to Ashley in the kitchen. "Poor Emily. She always looks so tired, but she means well. Bless her heart." They hadn't asked why she looked tired. They hadn't cared to find out. Love, real love, should have meant seeing her pain and wanting to ease it. Family should have meant nurturing, protecting, not exploiting under the guise of tradition. Love is not supposed to hurt family, is not supposed to use you up. A tear slid down Emily's cheek, hot and bitter. She let it fall, let it etch a path through the exhaustion carved into her face. She didn't wipe it away. It wasn't just the pain of the surgery. It was years of silent service of pushing her own needs aside to make everyone else's holidays magical, meaningful, memorable. And what had she received in return? A pat on the back, a nod of acknowledgement, a new expectation for next time. She pressed her palms against her face, muffling a broken sob. For a few moments she cried, not the loud, dramatic wailing she feared would draw attention, but the soft, crumpled crying of a woman finally allowing herself to grieve the love she never really received. This was mourning. Mourning the version of herself who had tried so hard to be good enough, useful enough, indispensable enough for them to finally see her as more than a servant. The mourning was necessary, but it would be the last time. Slowly, Emily wiped her face dry with the sleeve of her sweater. Her breath hitched once, then steadied. She looked around the room, the Christmas boxes still stacked unopened in the corner, the dining table still bare. She thought about Margaret's inevitable disapproval, about Daniel's casual disregard, about the dozens of texts that would soon flood her phone, each demanding, reminding, commanding. For the first time, the thought didn't terrify her. It emboldened her. They had trained her to believe that her value rested in her ability to endure silently. They had conditioned her to equate love with service duty, with affection. But that training ended tonight. Emily stood carefully feeling the tight pull of her stitches under her sweater. The pain was sharp, immediate, but it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a beginning. This Christmas wouldn't be about proving her worth. It wouldn't be about enduring for the sake of appearances. It would be about reclaiming her dignity, about teaching herself and them that her life, her health and her spirit were no longer for sale. She straightened her spine, grimacing slightly at the effort. There was work to be done, not the kind they expected, the endless chopping, stirring, baking, but work that truly mattered. Work that would set her free. Emily crossed the room, her steps slow but sure, and picked up her phone from the coffee table. It was time to make some plans. Emily stared at the silent phone in her hand, feeling the familiar tremor of doubt threatening to creep back in. Years of conditioning made her hesitate, years of minimizing her own needs, of telling herself, maybe next time they'll see, maybe next time they'll care. But this time she pressed past the hesitation. She tapped on Olivia's contact and pressed, "Call." The phone rang only once before her best friend's warm, no-nonsense voice answered. Everything okay?" Emily swallowed, surprised by the sudden lump in her throat. "Liv, I need help." There was a pause, brief but understanding, and then Olivia said, "I'm listening." Emily exhaled shakily and told her everything. About Daniel's announcement, about the years of thankless labor, about the pain, the loneliness, the invisible scars stitched into every holiday memory. When she finished, Olivia didn't immediately respond with outrage or pity. Instead, she said, "It's about damn time." Emily gave a small, choked laugh. "I'm serious, Liv." "So am I," Olivia said firmly. "You've spent years setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. It's time they learned what it feels like to fend for themselves." For the first time that day, Emily felt lighter, as if someone else had lifted a fraction of the burden she had carried for so long. "All right." Olivia continued, her tone shifting into the crisp, decisive one she used at work when tackling a new project. "First things first, where are you going to be on Christmas Day?" Emily hesitated. "Here, I guess." "No," Olivia snapped gently. "You need to leave. You need space. You need real rest." Emily chewed her lip. "I can't afford some fancy hotel right now." "I'll find you something affordable and perfect," Olivia said. "Somewhere peaceful, somewhere healing. Let me handle that." "Okay," Emily whispered. "And?" Olivia said, voice practically gleeful now. "We're not leaving them with an empty house." "No, they want a feast. Let's give them a feast." Emily sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Olivia said, "we're going to order every kind of takeout available on Christmas Day. Chinese, Thai, Indian, Mediterranean, you name it. We'll prepay. We'll leave menus all over the dining room. Let them pick and choose." A laugh, small, shaky, but real, bubbled up in Emily's chest. That's brilliant." "And the cherry on top," Olivia continued. "We're going to document everything." Emily blinked. "Document. Receipts, screenshots, voice recordings, every dismissive comment, every demand, every text telling you to stop being dramatic while you're literally recovering from surgery. We'll create a portfolio so complete that if they ever try to spin the narrative, you have hard proof." Emily nodded slowly, feeling the pieces click into place. Justice, not revenge born of anger, but a reclamation of her truth. "I'll start now," Emily said, determination igniting her voice. "I have old texts saved, medical bills too. And don't forget the voicemails," Olivia added. "Every time Margaret calls and guilt trips, you save it." Emily's fingers itched to move to act, to finally fight back. "I'll also call the recovery retreat in the meantime," Olivia said. "There's one near Lake Haven I've heard about, cozy cabins, medical staff on standby, total privacy." "Liv," Emily said, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Olivia replied. "You're doing something most people never have the courage to do, choosing yourself." Emily stared out the window, watching the cold December wind twist the bare branches outside. For so long, she had been the good girl, the peacekeeper, the silent worker bee who buzzed through life without demanding anything in return. Not anymore. She ended the call and immediately got to work. First, she opened her medical records folder and snapped pictures of every hospital bill, every doctor's note, every instruction sheet that clearly spelled out no lifting, no prolonged standing. Then she scrolled back through months, years of text messages from Daniel and Margaret, and Ashley, picking out every instance where her pain had been dismissed or minimized. Every, "You're just being sensitive," every, "It's not that serious," every guilt trip layered beneath fake concern. She created a new folder on her laptop and labeled it simply, Truth. By the time she finished compiling the evidence, Emily's heart felt raw but clean, like a wound properly washed after festering too long. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Retreat confirmed. Cabin 12 Lakeside View check-in, December 24th. Paid in full. Merry Christmas to you. M. Emily smiled, a true, unguarded smile that lit her face from within. Christmas was coming, but this year it would be her Christmas. The first one she would truly own, and it would be unforgettable. The next few days passed in a strange, almost sacred kind of silence, while Daniel busied himself with work and Margaret sent endless lists of Christmas demands. Emily moved like a shadow through her own home, gathering strength beneath her still tender skin. Pain was a constant companion. Every step pulled against her stitches. Every stretch of her arm ignited a burning ache deep inside her abdomen. Yet somehow the pain no longer made her feel weak. It reminded her she was alive, healing fighting. By day, she endured Daniel's absent-minded comments. Make sure the linens are ironed for Mom. Ashley says Madison's gluten-free now. Whatever that means, adjust the menu. She nodded quietly, filing every word away like weapons in an invisible arsenal. By night, Emily and Olivia built their masterpiece. Olivia came over after work, arms laden with supplies, rolls of tape, reams of colored paper, markers, scissors, a laptop already buzzing with activity. The dining room became their command center. Together, they printed out menus from every restaurant they could find, willing to deliver on Christmas Day. Dragon Garden Chinese takeout, Bombay Spice Indian cuisine, the Mediterranean table, Thai Lotus Express, Mama's Pizza and subs. Each menu was carefully printed on heavy cardstock, bold and colorful. Olivia took gleeful pleasure in enlarging the fonts, making sure the dishes practically shouted from the pages. Emily sat at the table, slicing rolls of tape with slow, deliberate motions. Even the smallest tasks taxed her healing body. But she relished the exhaustion. It was purposeful this time, not imposed. Imagine Margaret's face when she sees this wall-to-wall takeout extravaganza, Olivia said, half laughing, half in awe. It's like the Sistine Chapel of Defiance. Emily smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her tired eyes. I'm thinking of it more like an art installation, a tribute to every woman who's ever been taken for granted. Olivia beamed. Now you're talking. The menus weren't the only preparation. They crafted a letter, too. A farewell note that Emily insisted must be polite formal, even a little sugary sweet. The tone needed to be perfect. Not angry, not bitter, just devastatingly, politely final. Emily tapped away at her laptop late into the night, while Olivia sprawled on the couch, tossing in sarcastic suggestions that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. Finally, Emily read the finished letter aloud. To my beloved family. In the spirit of the holiday season, and in light of my ongoing medical recovery, I have thoughtfully arranged for a festive array of dining options. Please enjoy choosing your meal from the carefully curated menus provided. All orders are prepaid and available for your convenience. Should you have any concerns or dissatisfaction with your Christmas experience, I encourage you to direct inquiries to my surgeon's office, as they have explicitly advised rest and non-participation in hosting activities. Thank you for your understanding, and may this holiday season bring you the clarity, compassion, and self-sufficiency that true family spirit deserves. Warm regards, Emily. Olivia clapped her hands together. It's beautiful. It's like Martha Stewart met the Godfather. They laughed again, and the sound felt unfamiliar but precious in the empty house. As the plan solidified, Emily noticed the change within herself. Yes, her body ached. Yes, she still tired easily. Yes, a part of her mourned the years wasted on people who didn't deserve her. But there was a growing steeliness in her spine now. Every checklist completed, every menu printed, every letter folded was a stitch, sewing her self-worth back together. She wasn't doing this out of revenge. Not really. She was doing it to break the cycle, to tell the little voice inside her so long ignored that she was worth protecting. On the night before Christmas Eve, Emily stood alone in the dining room surrounded by neatly stacked menus and the sealed envelope containing her final letter. The house felt different, lighter, not because it was free of decorations Margaret had planned to bring her own anyway, but because for the first time it wasn't filled with fear. No longer did Emily feel like a servant scrambling to appease impossible standards. This was her rebellion. Silent, strategic, unshakable. She rested her hand gently over her healing scar, feeling the pulse of her own heartbeat beneath the thin fabric of her sweater. Not all scars were visible. Some lived in the soul. But even scars, she realized, could become armor, and she was almost ready for battle. The house was unnaturally quiet, wrapped in a blanket of stillness that pressed against the windows like the falling snow outside. Emily sat alone at the kitchen table, a bowl of lukewarm soup cradled between her hands. Steam curled upward, vanishing into the chill air. She took slow, careful sips, mindful of the lingering ache in her abdomen. It was Christmas Eve, a night that used to be filled with frantic cooking laughter, forced through clenched teeth and the endless clatter of preparations she alone was expected to complete. But not this year. This year, the silence was her sanctuary. Her phone buzzed for the 5th time in 10 minutes, vibrating angrily against the table. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Finally, she flipped the screen upward. A flood of messages from Margaret Ashley and even Madison filled the screen. Make sure the turkey is properly thawing, no excuses this time. Mom says you better not mess up dinner again. If you can't handle it, you should have said something earlier. You're lucky we even come to your house anymore. Each message was a fresh slap to the face, a stark reminder of the years she'd spent bending herself into knots trying to please people who saw her effort as obligation, not love. She set the phone down without replying. Let them rage. Let them stew in their entitlement. Tonight was not about them. It was about her freedom. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, the frigid night air rushed in, and so did Olivia, carrying 2 large bags and wearing a grin as sharp and bright as a blade. Merry almost freedom, Olivia whispered, stepping inside and stomping snow off her boots. Emily smiled faintly, stepping back to let her in. You're right on time. Together, they moved through the house like quiet revolutionaries. Olivia pulled out tape and menus, while Emily directed where each sheet should go. They wallpapered the dining room first, covering every inch of the pristine cream walls with colorful, mouth-watering options from every cuisine imaginable. Next, they tackled the foyer, the hallway, even the living room mantel. By the time they finished, the house looked nothing like the pristine, magazine-worthy holiday dream Margaret would have expected. It looked instead like a battlefield, a beautiful, unapologetic battlefield. Olivia stood back admiring their work. It's glorious, pure, chaotic, gourmet justice. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was almost done. Just one more step. She retrieved the sealed envelope from her pocket and placed it delicately at the center of the dining room table, weighing it down with a single silver ornament, the same one Margaret had given her their first Christmas together. Jokingly inscribed, "For the family's newest little helper." How fitting, Emily thought, that it would now anchor her Declaration of Independence. Olivia squeezed her shoulder gently. Are you ready? Emily looked around the house, the bare tree, the undecorated halls, the walls adorned with takeout menus instead of garlands. She thought of the years she had spent here giving everything she had to people who only noticed when she fell short of their impossible expectations. And she thought of tomorrow, the stunned silence, the indignant cries, the messy, uncurated reality they would be forced to face without her smoothing the way. She touched the scar beneath her sweater, still tender, but stronger every day. "I'm ready," she said. For a moment, they stood there surrounded by the quiet hum of the heating vents and the weight of what was about to happen. Emily took one last, slow, deliberate walk through the house, letting her fingers trail over the back of the couch, the door frame, the edges of the kitchen counter. She was not leaving with bitterness. She was leaving with peace. At the front door she paused, looking back one final time. No guilt, no second-guessing, only certainty. She turned off the lights, leaving the menus to gleam under the faint glow of the street lamps outside, and followed Olivia into the night. Tomorrow the storm would break, but tonight Emily finally slept without fear. The morning sun hung low in the frosty sky, casting long, pale beams across the street as Emily loaded her small suitcase into Olivia's car. At exactly 10:45 a.m., she stood on the front porch of her house for the last time, her breath misting in the freezing air. Behind her, the home sat in perfect, eerie stillness, menus plastered across the walls. A single letter resting like a crown on the dining room table. Emily slipped into the passenger seat, feeling the firm, quiet finality of the moment. "Ready?" Olivia asked, gripping the steering wheel. Emily gave a nod. No tears, no hesitation. She pulled out her phone and opened the Ring camera app. "Let's watch the fireworks," she said. They parked just down the street, hidden from view. Through the small screen in Emily's hand, they saw Daniel's car pull into the driveway at precisely 11 a.m., followed closely by Margaret's polished SUV and Ashley's bright red sedan. Emily's heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with calm anticipation. The first thing the camera captured was the chaos of their arrival. Arms full of presents bags of last-minute decorations, Madison whining about the cold, Margaret barking orders before she even reached the front door. Daniel fumbled for his keys and swung the door open with a dramatic flourish. And then the moment. From the camera's view, Emily and Olivia watched as the group surged into the house and stopped dead. Confusion rippled through them like a physical wave. "Where's the smell?" Madison whined, wrinkling her nose. "There's no food cooking," Ashley snapped, peering toward the silent kitchen. "Something's wrong," Daniel muttered, glancing nervously around. The camera captured Margaret striding purposefully toward the dining room, only to freeze mid-step, her eyes widening in horror. Every wall of the dining room was covered in colorful takeout menus fluttering slightly in the draft from the open door. On the center of the dining table, under the gleam of the single silver ornament, sat the pristine envelope. Ashley reached it first, snatching it up with a dramatic gasp. She read aloud, her voice shrill and rising with each line. "To my beloved family, in the spirit of the holiday season and in light of my ongoing medical recovery, I have thoughtfully arranged for a festive array of dining options. Please enjoy choosing your meal from the carefully curated menus provided." Ashley's voice cracked. Madison let out a strangled little laugh, then quickly silenced it when Margaret turned a furious glare her way. Ashley continued reading, her face turning redder by the second. "All orders are prepaid and available for your convenience. Should you have any concerns or dissatisfaction with your Christmas experience, I encourage you to direct inquiries to my surgeon's office, as they have explicitly advised rest and non-participation in hosting activities. Warm regards, Emily." Silence. For one glorious suspended moment no one spoke, then Margaret exploded. "This is a joke!" she shrieked, her face blotching with rage. She crumpled the letter in her hand and threw it across the room. Ashley let out an indignant shriek of her own, scanning the menus taped to the walls. "What are we supposed to eat takeout on Christmas?" Daniel, still standing in the foyer with a dumbstruck expression, rubbed his face like he couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. "She can't do this," Margaret fumed, storming into the kitchen and yanking open cabinets. "She didn't even thaw a turkey. She's not here," Madison said softly. All eyes turned to the Ring camera mounted above the door, the silent witness to every second of their unraveling. In Olivia's car, Emily smiled. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't petty. It was a smile of liberation. Daniel pulled out his phone furiously. Tapping out a message, Margaret began barking new orders. "Call this place. Order that meal. Someone go find a grocery store that's open." But it was too late. They were stranded in a house wallpapered with their own entitlement, facing a holiday meal they hadn't prepared and didn't know how to create. Across the street, safe inside Olivia's warm car, Emily finally understood something vital. When you treat someone like an object, like a tool to serve your needs, you don't realize what you've lost until it's gone. She hadn't just walked away from a house. She had walked away from years of silent service, from being the family's invisible backbone, from allowing herself to be used without gratitude. And now they were left to feast on the consequences. Margaret's shrill voice echoed faintly through the Ring app. "She's selfish, after everything we've done for her." Olivia barked out a laugh beside her. "Done for you? Emily, you practically ran this family like a full-time job." Emily chuckled, feeling the weight on her chest lift ounce by ounce. She sent one final text to Daniel, short, simple, unassailable. "Merry Christmas. You're welcome." Then she turned off her phone. There would be no more demands, no more guilt, no more apologies. As Olivia pulled the car away from the curb, Emily didn't look back. There was nothing left worth seeing. Tomorrow, they would try to spin it their way. They would paint her as heartless, ungrateful, selfish. Let them. She knew the truth now. She was no one's servant. She was no one's obligation. She was free. And freedom, she thought with a smile, tasted better than any Christmas feast ever could. The cabin at Lake Haven was everything Olivia had promised, and more. Nestled among towering pines dusted with fresh snow, it looked like something pulled straight from a postcard. Cozy, warm, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of the lake and the occasional call of a distant bird. Emily let herself inside, carrying nothing but a small bag and a heart lighter than it had been in years. The first thing she did was sink onto the soft leather armchair by the window, a thick plaid blanket draped over her lap. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes, letting her body truly relax for the first time since her surgery. The pain was still there, a dull throb reminding her to move slowly to honor the healing still underway. But it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like proof. Proof that she had survived. Proof that she had chosen herself. Her phone buzzed on the side table, vibrating insistently. She ignored it. She wasn't ready yet not to hear the anger, the guilt trips, the desperate pleas she knew were flooding her inbox. Instead, she watched the snow fall outside, soft and endless, blanketing the world in clean, quiet peace. After a long, luxurious nap, she finally reached for her phone. She scrolled through the notifications, mechanically detached, like an observer reading someone else's drama. Dozens of messages blinked back at her. "I can't believe you would abandon your family on Christmas, Margaret. Come home, we can work this out." Daniel. "You're selfish. This was Mom's worst Christmas ever." Ashley. "Seriously, takeout. You made us a laughingstock." Madison, and mixed among them threats laced with desperation. "Don't think we won't tell everyone what you did. You're mentally unstable. You ruined Christmas for everyone." Emily read each one without emotion, simply archiving them like clutter to be swept away later. She didn't owe them a response. She didn't owe them anything. Setting her phone aside, she stretched carefully, feeling the stiffness in her muscles give way a little more with each passing hour. There was a fireplace already prepared with kindling. She lit it, watching the flames catch and dance, warming the little cabin. Outside, the world turned whiter, softer, quieter. Inside, Emily began to reclaim herself. Later that evening, with a steaming cup of cocoa in hand, she opened her laptop, curiosity light and almost playful nudged at her. She logged into Reddit where Olivia had messaged her earlier with a cryptic link. "You need to see this," Emily clicked. There it was, posted under an anonymous account, AITA for leaving my entitled in-laws with prepaid takeout menus on Christmas Day after years of being their unpaid servant. The post had exploded, thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, a sea of supportive, furious strangers rallying around her story. She scrolled, stunned, through comment after comment. "You are absolutely NTA. This is the most epic boundary setting I've ever seen. Family doesn't mean servitude. Proud of you for choosing yourself. Takeout. Christmas is now my new tradition. You're a legend. OP, you didn't ruin Christmas. You saved yourself, and that's worth celebrating." Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from something softer, fiercer, validation, recognition, freedom. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't selfish. She wasn't alone. She closed the laptop, slowly pressing the lid down as if sealing away years of guilt and self-doubt. The cabin crackled with warmth. Outside, the snow thickened, wrapping the world in silence. Emily leaned back, savoring the simple luxury of doing nothing. Tomorrow maybe she would respond to Olivia's excited messages. Tomorrow maybe she would start dreaming about a life free from obligations disguised as love. But tonight, she simply rested. For the first time in a long, long time, Emily knew she didn't have to earn her right to exist. She didn't have to prove her worth through exhaustion and sacrifice. She was enough, exactly as she was. And that truth, like the snow blanketing the earth outside, covered every broken piece inside her, with something pure and new. Emily smiled, her heart, finally, at peace. 1 week after Christmas, under a pale winter sky, Emily returned to the house that no longer felt like home. She stood at the front steps, her lawyer Andrea Miller at her side, a leather folder clutched tightly in Emily's gloved hand. Inside that folder was her past, documented, dated, undeniable, and her future waiting to be claimed. Daniel opened the door, his face crumpling with a mixture of hope and fear when he saw her. "Emily," he breathed, stepping back. "Finally. We need to talk about—" "No," Andrea said smoothly, stepping in first. "Today you listen." Daniel stiffened, confusion flashing across his features as they entered the house. The living room was a mess of half-torn decorations and unopened gifts, remnants of the Christmas that hadn't gone according to anyone's plan. Emily's stomach turned slightly at the sight, but she stayed steady. She was here for closure, not confrontation. She crossed to the coffee table and placed the folder down with a quiet finality. "These," she said, her voice clear and even, "are the divorce papers already signed?" Daniel paled. "Divorce? Emily, don't you think this is a little extreme over one bad Christmas?" Emily smiled thinly. "This isn't about one Christmas, Daniel. It's about every Christmas, every holiday, every time you watched me suffer and said nothing." Andrea opened the folder, sliding out document after document. Medical records from her surgery, showing the seriousness of the procedure, hospital bills, thousands of dollars of proof, printed screenshots of dismissive texts, transcripts of voicemails filled with guilt trips and demands, footage from the Ring camera capturing Margaret's tantrum and the family's entitled meltdown. Daniel flipped through them in silence, the color draining from his face with each new page. "I never meant to," he started. "But you did," Emily interrupted gently. "Not just once, not just when it was convenient, over and over again, Daniel." As if summoned by the rising tension, the front door burst open and Margaret stormed in, her cheeks red from the cold and fury. "Emily," she screeched, "I don't know what lies you're telling my son, but you are not tearing this family apart." Andrea stepped between them, holding up her phone calmly. "For your information, Mrs. Aldridge, this conversation is being recorded for legal purposes. Choose your words carefully." Margaret sputtered, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on dry land. She took a step back, visibly struggling to contain her rage. Emily faced her squarely, meeting Margaret's fury with serene resolve. "You already tore this family apart," Emily said, her voice calm but steely. "Every time you treated me like hired help instead of a person. Every time you dismissed my pain. Every time you demanded and demanded without ever once asking if I was okay." Margaret blustered. "We're family. We have traditions. Traditions that required my sacrifice," Emily said sharply. "Traditions that only mattered if I bled for them." Daniel sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Andrea laid the final set of papers on the table, a detailed list of Emily's terms. Equitable division of assets. The house to be sold. No future contact demanded or expected. You'll receive your official copy within the week, Andrea said crisply. "If you wish to contest anything, you'll need to go through the courts, but I advise you to consider carefully before doing so." Margaret opened her mouth again, but Emily held up a hand. "I'm not your servant anymore," Emily said quietly, powerfully. Her gaze swept from Margaret to Daniel. "I'm not here to fix your holidays. I'm not here to carry your expectations on my back. I'm done." There was a finality in her voice that left no room for argument. Margaret turned on Daniel, grabbing his arm. "Say something. Don't just let her walk away." Daniel looked up hollow-eyed. For once he said nothing. He had no defense. Left. Emily watched them for a long, still moment, the crumbling of the empire they had built atop her sacrifices. There was no satisfaction in it. Only clarity. Without another word, she picked up her coat and headed for the door. Andrea followed, pausing only to say, "Expect communication through our office. Have a good day." Outside, the air was sharp and cold against Emily's cheeks, but it tasted sweeter than anything she had felt inside that house. As she and Andrea walked toward the waiting car, Emily felt a smile touch her lips, not of triumph but of release. But behind her, the house stood empty, filled only with echoes of entitlement and regret. Ahead of her stretched the open road, wide and unwritten. And for the first time in years, it belonged entirely to her. The house sold faster than Emily expected. It closed within a month, the buyers eager for a suburban property even in the dead chill of winter. When the final papers were signed and the funds transferred, Emily stood in the driveway one last time, the keys warm and unfamiliar in her palm. She didn't cry. There was no sorrow in this goodbye. The house had been a battleground disguised as a home, a monument to years of invisible labor and silent endurance. Let someone else fill its walls with new memories. She was done bleeding in its halls. The proceeds were divided equally as the divorce agreement stipulated. Half went to Daniel, who had barely spoken to her since their final meeting, communicating only through terse emails. He had tried, of course, in the weeks leading up to the sale. Texts begging for second chances. Voicemails, heavy with half-hearted apologies. "We can go to counseling," he had pleaded once. "We can fix this. We're family." But Emily had learned something precious. Family wasn't a title granted by marriage or blood. Family was where you were seen, where you were valued, where you could rest your soul without fear of being used up. This house had never been that place. Daniel's family had never been that family. And she would never again accept anything less. She deleted the voicemails without listening to the end, blocked the numbers, wrote a single final email. "There is no fixing what was never built on respect. I wish you healing, but I am choosing mine elsewhere." Then she moved forward, one small, steady step at a time. Her new apartment wasn't grand or luxurious. It was a second-floor walk-up with creaky hardwood floors, a tiny galley kitchen, and a sunroom that overlooked the sleepy curve of a quiet street. But it was hers. Emily decorated it slowly, thoughtfully. No gaudy ornaments forced by obligation, no heavy family heirlooms hung like anchors on the walls. Instead, she chose soft throws second-hand furniture that made her smile, Stacks of well-loved books, plants that thrived on light and freedom. It didn't matter that the space was small, it felt vast with possibility. On the first night after she moved in, Emily sat cross-legged on her new couch, a cup of tea cradled between her hands. Outside, the world was dusted in the first snow of the year, and the city lights blinked softly in the distance. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table, free of demands, free of guilt. She thought back to everything she had survived, the endless holidays hosting while sick, the birthday parties cooked through migraines, the family gatherings where her pain was invisible, her exhaustion inconvenient. And now finally the silence wasn't heavy with loneliness, it was rich with peace. For years she had mistaken endurance for love. She had believed that if she just worked harder, sacrificed more, swallowed every slight with grace, she would be rewarded with belonging. But belonging bought with self-erasure was never real. It was slavery by another name. Now Emily knew family is the place where you heal, not where you hurt. And if that meant building a new family out of friends, kindness, and chosen love, so be it. She smiled, setting her tea down and pulling a worn blanket over her lap. Outside, the snow continued to fall soft and endless, wrapping the world in fresh beginnings. Inside, Emily wrapped herself in something warmer still. Freedom, hope, the knowledge that she had saved herself. Not because anyone came riding to her rescue, not because anyone finally realized her worth, but because she had decided she was worth saving all along, and this quiet, imperfect, fiercely claimed life was her reward. The next Christmas morning dawned crisp and bright, the sky a soft watercolor wash of gold and blue. Emily stirred awake in her sun-drenched bedroom, the scent of cinnamon and coffee drifting in from the kitchen. She smiled into her pillow before sitting up slowly, savoring the quiet joy that bloomed in her chest. No frantic alarms. No endless lists of things to cook, decorate, or organize. No pit of dread churning in her stomach. This year, Christmas was hers, and it was going to be beautiful. She pulled on a cozy sweater and padded barefoot into the kitchen where Olivia was already bustling around humming to herself. On the counter sat a stack of takeout containers, Chinese, Thai, Indian, each one lovingly arranged on festive plates. "You didn't think I'd let you get through Christmas without takeout, did you?" Olivia said, grinning as she handed Emily a mug of coffee topped with whipped cream. Emily laughed, warm and unguarded. "You know me too well." Soon the apartment filled with laughter and the comfortable chaos of chosen family arriving. There was Jason, Olivia's boyfriend, carrying a lopsided cake he proudly claimed to have baked himself. Samantha and Marcus arms linked, balancing a bottle of wine and a plate of homemade cookies. Even Layla, Emily's co-worker turned friend, who shyly placed a potted poinsettia on the windowsill. No one arrived with demands. No one criticized or judged. No one expected anything but warmth and presence. Emily watched them settle onto the mismatched chairs and floor cushions around her modest living room plates balanced on their knees, laughter bubbling up as they shared stories, small gifts and jokes. There was no formal sit-down dinner, no rigid schedule, no heavy expectations, weighing down the air. Only easy conversation. Only gentle kindness. Only joy. As she sat cross-legged on the couch, a plate of dumplings in her lap, Emily realized she had built something extraordinary, not out of obligation or tradition, but out of authenticity. This wasn't the kind of Christmas her old life would have recognized. There was no polished silverware, no grand feast, no hollow performances of family unity, but it was real. And it was enough. At one point, as the evening sun painted the snow outside a deep, dusky rose, Olivia raised her glass in an impromptu toast to new traditions, she said, her eyes shining, to loving ourselves enough to rewrite the rules. Everyone clinked their glasses together, a soft musical sound that seemed to bless the room itself. Emily lifted her own glass high, feeling the truth settle deep into her bones. She had spent so many years trapped by someone else's version of love, someone else's demands, someone else's traditions. But now she understood. The most beautiful tradition was living true to herself. After the last plate was cleared and the final hugs exchanged, Emily stood alone in her living room, her heart still glowing with the warmth of the evening. The apartment was quiet again, but not lonely. She walked to the window and looked out over the snow-blanketed street, the lights from other homes twinkling softly in the distance. Maybe someday she would host a bigger gathering. Maybe someday she would decorate a tree again, or bake cookies from scratch, or start a new custom that was all her own. But it would never again be out of obligation. It would be because it brought her joy, because it reflected who she was, not who others demanded her to be. Emily pressed her hand gently to the window pane, feeling the cool glass against her skin, and smiled. At last she had found her place, not in a grand house, not in the approval of people who only loved her when she served them, not in traditions she had been guilted into upholding. She had found her home inside herself. In the end, she whispered to the quiet, to the stars above, to the life she was still learning to love. The most beautiful tradition is living true to myself. And this time she knew she would never let anyone take that away again.